this time, we'll move along to Hallel, which you can find in the Shabbat Sim Shalom on page 133.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddush Adonai b'tzotav v'tzivanu likro et Hallel. Hallelujah. Hallelujah Adonai. Hallelujah et Shem Adonai. Shem Barak Nitav. Yimizor Shem Hashem V'Al Me'al Shem Adonai Ra Kolim Adonai Asher Mayim Kvodav. Mikal Eloheinu Gil Shavet Amishbili Rabba Shamayim U'Va'aretz Mikimi Miafarda Mikimi Meafarda Mikimi Meafarda Mikimi Meafarda Mikimi Meafarda Mikimi Meafarda Me'ash Bagan Mevian Any Hallelujah. But say Yisrael, me Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov, Me'am Loez. But say Yisrael, me Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov, Me'am Loez. Hayta Yehuda Kodsha Yisrael Shalotav Hayam Rav Hayahanos Hayardem Lisov Liachor B'Feki Yisrael Mitzrayim B'Feki Yaakov Me'am Loez Hey Harim Yam Bam 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 Rakadu Ke'elim Give out Give Nation Malacha Hayam Ya la 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 Kitanis Hayarden Tisav Leachor Hey Harim Tikkadukaim Give out Give Nation Milif Neadam Holy Aretz Milif Elohai Yaakov Ha'avchi Hatzur Agamayim Chalamish Le'mayim Adonai Zochenu Nishbarech Yivarech et Beit Yisrael Yivarech et Beit Herron Yivarech Yirei Adonai Haktanim Im Hagdolim Im Yosev Adonai Alechem Yabnechem Beruchim Atem Adonai Osei Shamayim Ba'aretz Shamayim Ladonai Haaretz Natan Livnei Adam Lo Hamitim Hallelujah V'lo Kol Yordei Duma V'anachnu Nivarech Ya Me'ata B'yad Olam Hallelujah Mashiach Nikolai, goes to the side, Shemin Nekara, Milarai, and Salem, Nagdalamo, Yakabin, and the Hasidah, and the Ana Adonai, Ki Ani Avdecha, Ana Adonai, Ki Ani Avdecha. Ani Avdecha ben Amatecha, Ani Avdecha ben Amatecha, Ani Avdecha ben Amatecha, Pitachta leMoserai. Chatzot Beit Haleinu Yishalayim, Hallelujah. Hallelujah, Adonai, kol goyim shabchuchu kol ha'amim ki gavar aleinu chazda v'yemet Adonai le'olam hallelujah Hodu Adonai Ki tov ki le'olam chasta yomarna Yisrael ki le'olam chasta Yomruna Mitzaharam Ki le'olam chasda Yomruna Yirei Adonai Ki le'olam chasda Min ha'metzar karatiyah Anani v'merchavia min ha'metzar karatia Anani v'merchavia Adonai nilavi rara Adonai Yai mazase li adam yai min hametzar karatia anani v'merchavia min hametzar karatia anani v'merchavia Adonai lila lavirara mayase li adam yadai Adonai li be'ozrai yani ere b'sonai Tov lachasot ba'adonai mi b'tawach ba'adam Tov lachasot ba'adonai mi b'tawach ba'in divim Kol goyim sivavuni b'shem Adonai ki hamilam Sabuni gam sivavuni b'shem Adonai ki amilam Sabuni chidivorim tochek eish kotzim b'shem Adonai ki amilam b'shem Adonai ki amilam Dachot dichlenu pol v'adonai azarani Yeshua Kol rina Yeshua Kol rina Yeshua be'ahole tzadikim Kol rina Yeshua Kol rina Yeshua be'ahole tzadikim Yamin Adonai Asechayev Yamin Adonai Asechayev Yamin Adonai Asechayev Yamin Adonai Osechayel Yamin Lo amut k'pchiach maser masaya Yisar shanaya V'lamave lo nitanani Pikuli Sharet Tzedek Avo Valamodeyai Pikuli Sharet Tzedek Avo Valamodeyai Zehashar Ladonai Tzadikim Yavo Zehashar Ladonai Tzadikim Yavo Odicha Ki Anitani Vatili Lishua Odicha Ki Anitani Vakili Lishua Ben Masu Habonim Haita Lerashpina and Ben Masu Habonim Haita Lerashpina Yet Adonai Haita Zod Hinirla Bienenu Mayet Adonai Haita Zod Hinirla Bienenu Zeh Hayom Asa Adonai Nagila Benisbechava Zeh Hayom Asa Adonai Nagila Benisbechava Ana Adonai Hoshiana Ana Adonai Hoshiana Ana Adonai Hatzlichana Ana Adonai Hatzlichana Baruch haba b'shem Adonai berachnu chimi b'Adonai. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai berachnu chimi b'Adonai. El Adonai v'ya'ir lanu yisruchak ba'avotina karnet hamizbeach. El Adonai v'ya'ir lanu yisruchak ba'avotina karnet hamizbeach. Eliyah taviodeka. Elohaya Romameka Eliyah Taviyahodeka Elohaya Romameka Oduladonai Kitov Kili Olam Chazdo Oduladonai Kitov Kili Olam Chazdo Yavaluch Eloheinu Chamasacha V'chazidecha tzadikim v'chtosei V'sonecha V'cholamcha Beit Yisrael V'rina Yodu V'yitbarchu V'yishabchu Yifaru V'yarimu V'yaritzu V'yakdishu V'yamlichu Et Shimcha Makeinu Yilecha Tov V'hodol V'shimcha Na'el Yizahamer Me'olam Yad Olam Ata'el Baruch Atah Adonai Melech Mehulal Batishvachot.
Yasher Koach, Toda Rava. Thank you very much, Stan, for chanting and leading us in Hallel this morning. We're going to now move to the chanting of Shir Hashirim, which is traditionally done either on the Shabbat Chol Hamoed of Pesach, or if it's not Chol Hamoed, then here as it is on this Shabbat. Shir Hashirim is connected to Passover, as each of the Megillot is attached to a different holiday, Shir Hashirim, the idea of the relationship between God and the Israelite people, is similar to a relationship between two in a partnership, in love with one another, and here we have Pesach as sort of the betrothal between God and the Jewish people, with then Shavuot being the marriage ceremony with the chuppah, with the mountain in the Midrash as the chuppah and the Torah as the ketubah. So Shir Hashirim we're going to chant this morning and have a number of different people who have signed up to do so. You can find Shir Hashirim in a Bible, in a Tanakh, or on the screen itself.
Shir Hashirim asher li shlomo yishakeni min shikas pihu ki tovim dodecha miyayin l'reach shmanecha tovim shemen turak shemecha al kein alamos ahevuka moshkeni acharecha narutza Heviani hamelech adarav Nagila v'nismecha bach Naskira dodecha miyayin Misharim ahevuka Shechora ani finava Vinahus Yerushalayim Ki ahale kedar Kiryah Shlomo Al tiruni shani shechar forest Sheshazafasni hashamesh B'nei imi niharuvi Samuni notera es hakromim Karmishali lo natarti Hagidali She'ahava nafshi Echa sire Echa tarbitz batzaharaim Shama heyekeotia Al edrecha verecha Im lo seidi lach Hayafa banashim Tzilach B'ikvei Hatzon Urei Eskadi Osai Al Mishkanos Haroim L'susasi B'rithei Faro Dimisi Rayasi Nafu L'chayech Batorim Tzavorech Bacharuzim Torei Zahav Naselach Im Nekudos HaKosef Ache HaMelech Bimsibo Nirdi Nasan Reifo Tziror Hamor Dodi Li Ben Shaddai Yalin Eshkol HaKofer Dodi Li Bicharme Ein Gedi Hinach Yafa Rayasi Hinach Yafa Einayif Yonim Hincha Yafa Dodi Afnaim Af Arsenu Ra'anana Karos Batenu Arazim Rahitenu Birosim
אני חבצלת השרון, שושנת העמקים, כשושנה בין החוכים, כן רעייתי בין הבנות, כתפוח בעצי היער, כן דודי בין הבנים, בצילו חימדתי וישבתי, ופריו מתוק לחיקי. הביאני אל בית היין ודגלו עלי אהבה. שמחוני בשישות, רבדוני בתפוחים, כי חולת אהבה אני. שמאלו תחת לראשי, וימינו תחבקני. השבעתי אתכם בנות ירושלים בצבאות או בעיילות השדה, אם תאירו ואם תעוררו את האהבה עד שתחפץ. כל דודי הנה זה בא, מדלג על ההרים, מקפץ על הגבעות. דומה דודי לצבי, או לעופר האיילים. הנה זה עומד אחר כתלנו, משגיח מן החלונות, מציץ מן החרקים. ענה דודי ואמר לי, קומי לך, רעייתי יפתי ולכי לך, כי הינו הסתיו עבר, הגשם חלף הלך לו, הניצנים נראו בארץ, עת הזמיר הגיע, וכל התור נשמע בארצנו. התאנה חנתה פגיה, והגפנים סמדר נתנו ריח. קומי לכי לכי רעייתי יפתי הולכי לך. יונתי בחגבי הסלע, בסתר המדרגה, הריני את מראייך, השמיני את קולך, כי קולך ערב ומראך נאווה. אחזו לנו שעלים, שעלים קטנים, מחבלים כרמים, וכרמים סמדר. דודי לי ואני לו, הרואה בשושנים, עד שיפוח היום ונסו הצללים. סוף דמלאכה דודי לצבי, עופר האיילים על הרי ותר. על משכבי בלילות ביקשתי את שאהבה נפשי, ביקשתי ולא מצאתיו. עד קומה נא ואסובבה בעיר, בשווקים וברחובות אבקשה את שאהבה נפשי, ביקשתי ולא מצאתי. מצאוני השומרים הסובבים בעיר, את שאהבה נפשי ראיתם. כמעט שעברתי מהם, עד שמצאתי את שאהבה נפשי. אחזתי ולא ארפנו, עד שהביאותיו אל בית אמי, ואל חדר הורתי. השבעתי אתכם בנות ירושלים בצבאות, או באיילות השדה, אם תאירו ואם תעוררו את האהבה עד שתחפץ. מזאת עולה מן המדבר כתמרות עשן, מכותרת מור ולבנה מכל אבקת רוכל. הנה מיתתו של שלמה 60 גיבורים סביב לה, מגיבורי ישראל. כולם אחוזי חרב, מלומדי מלחמה, איש חרבו על ירחו מפחד בלילות. הפריון עשה לו המלך שלמה מעצי הלבנון. עמודיו עשה כסף, רפידתו זהב, מרכבו ארגמן. תוכו רצוף אהבה מבנות ירושלים. צאנה וראינה בנות ציון במלך שלמה, בעטרה שיתרו לו עמו ביום חתונתו וביום שמחת ליבו.
הנך יפה רעייתי, הנך יפה, עינייך יונים מבעד לצמתך, שערך כעדר העזים שלשו מהר גלעד, שינייך כעדר הקצובות שעלו מן הרחצה, שכולן מתאימות ושכולה אין בהם. חוט השני שפתותייך, ומתברך נווה, כפלח הרימון רקתך, מבעד לצמתך. כמגדל דוד צווארך, בנוי לתלפיות, אלף המגן תלוי עליו, כל שלטי הגיבורים. שני שדייך, שני עפרים, תומי צביעה, הרואים השושנים, עד שיפוח היום ונעשו הצללים. אלך לי אל הר המור ואל גבעת הלבונה, כולך יפה רעייתי ומום אין בך. איתי מלבנון קלה, איתי מלבנון תבואי, תשורי מראש שמנה, מראש סיר וחרמון, רימונות אריות מהרי נמרים. ליבבתיני אחותי כלה, ליבבתיני באחת מעינייך, באחד ענק מצווארנייך. מה יפו דודייך אחותי כלה, מה טובו דודייך מיין, וריח שמנייך מכל בשמים. נופת תיטופנה שפתותייך כלה, דבש וחלב תחת לשונך, וריח שלמותייך כריח לבנון. גן נעול אחותי כלה, גל נעול מעיין חתום, שלחייך פרדס רימונים עם פרי מגדים, כפרים עם נרדים.
נרד וחרקום, קנה וקינמון, עם כל עצי לבונה, מור אחלות, עם כל ראשי ושמים, מעיין גנים, באר מים חיים, ונוצלים מן לבנון, אורי צפון, ובואי תימן, הפיכי גניהי, יזולו ושמח, יבוא דודי לגנו, ויאכל פרי מגדיו.
Going to move ahead to the 7th chapter. Jevra, you're muted.
I'm so sorry. I'll start again.
That's okay.
Shuvi, shuvi, hashulamit, shuvi, shuvi, v'necheze bach, matechezu bashulamit, kimcholat hamachanayim. Mayafuf amayich, banalim bat nadiv, Chamukei rechayich kamo chalayim, ma'aseh yedei oman. Shorei chagan hasahar, al yachsar hamazeg, bitnei charemat chitim, suga bashoshanim. Shnei shadayich ki shnei ofarim taumei tzviah. Tzavarech kamigdal hashin enayich ברחות בחשבון, על שער בת רבים, אפך כמגדל הלבנון, צופה פני דמשק. ראשך עלייך ככרמל, ודלת ראשך כארגמן, מלך עשור ברהטים. מה יפית ומה נעמת אהבה בתענוגים. זאת קומתך דמתה לתמר, ושדייך לאשכולות. אמרת אלה ותמר, אוחזה בסן סיניו, ויהיו שדייך כאשכולות הגפן, וריח אפך כתפוחים. וחיכך כיין הטוב, הולך לדודי למישרים, דודב שפתי ישנים. אני לדודי ועלי תשוקתו. לך דודי נצא השדה, נלינה בכפרים. נשכימה לכרמים, נראה, אם פרחה הגפן תצח הסמדר. הנצו הרימונים שם, אתן את דודי לך. הדודאים נתנו ריח, ועל פתחנו כל מגדים, חדשים גם ישנים. דודי צפנתי לך.
מעידנך כאח לי, יונק שדי עמי, אמצעך בחוץ אשקך, גם לא יבוזו לי. אנהגך אביאך אל בית עמי, תלמדני, אשכחה מיין הרקח, מעסיס רימונים. שמאלה תחת ראשי, ומינה תחבקני. השבעתי אתכם, בנות ירושלים, מה צעירו ומה תעוררו, את אהבה עד שתחפץ. מזאת עולה מן המדבר, מתרפקת על דודם. תחת התפוח עוררתיך, שמה חיבלתך אמך, שמה חיבלה ילדתך. שימני כחותם על ליבך, כחותם על זרועך, כי עזב כמוות אהבה קשה כשאול קינם רשפה אש שלהבתיה. מים רבים לא יוכלו לכבות את האהבה, ונהרות לא ישטפוה. אם ייתן איש את כל חום ביתו באהבה, בוז יבוזו לו. אחות לנו קטנה ושדיים אין לה, מה נעשה לאחותנו ביום שדובר בה? אם קומה היא Nivne aleha tirat kasef, vimdelet hihi netur aleha luach ares. Ani choma v'shadai kamigdalot az haiti ve'enav kemotzei shalom. Kerem haya li shlomo v'val hamon natan et hakerem lenotrim ish yavi befiryo alaf kasef karmi sheli lefanai. Ha'elef lecha li shlomo lecha shlomo umatayim lenotrim et piryo hayoshevet pagoyim chaverim makshivim lekolech hashmi'inihi berach dodi Ud melacha litzvi leofer ha'ayalim hare v'asamim. I want to wish you Yasher Koach and Toda Rabbah. Thank you to all of those who chanted this morning: Shir Hashirim, Myrna Goldman, Larry Paul, Gabriela Pereira Herron, and Franca Brilliant, and Jevra Temsky. Thank you all for joining me in chanting Shir Hashirim this morning. We're now going to continue with the Torah reading, which the special reading for the seventh day of Pesach is from the book of Shemot, from Exodus. It begins chapter 13, verse 17, which is the beginning of Parshat Beshalach. And in Parshat Beshalach, we get to where the Israelites are at the sea and ready. Well, not really ready to cross yet, but once the Egyptians come up after them, then they'll cross the sea. So we'll have Shirat Hayam later in the Torah reading. The timing is the tradition that on the seventh day is when the Israelites cross the sea. So here we are on the seventh day of Pesach, and thus the connection between the Torah reading and this morning. So we will have the chanting beginning again, Exodus 13, verse 17, and you can find it on page 399 in the Eitz Chaim Chumash. Dana. You're muted.
Got it.
There
Am I
you go.
doing aliyot?
Just the chanting.
Oh, just go right through?
Yep.
Okay. Stop from after, right? We got to shift.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Vayehi b'shalach paro et ha'am b'lo nacham Elohim derech eretz Pelishtim ki karov hu ki amar Elohim pen yinachem ha'am b'rotam milchama v'shavu Mitzrayma vayasev Elohim et ha'am derech hamidbar yam suf v'chamushim alu v'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim Vayikach Moshe et atzmod Yosef imo Ki hishpia b'nei Yisrael emor, pakod yivkod Elohim etchem, b'halitem et atzmotai mizeh itchem, vayisu misukot, vayachanu veitam b'ktzei hamidbar, v'Adonai olech לפניהם יומם, בעמוד ענן להנחותם הדרך ולילה, בעמוד אש להאיר להם, ללכת יומם ולילה. לא ימיש עמוד הענן יומם, בעמוד האש לילה לפני העם. וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל וישובו ויחנו לפני פי החירות בין מגדול ובין הים, לפני בעל צפון נכלכו תחנו על הים. ואמר פרעה לבני ישראל, נבוכים הם בארץ, סגר עליהם המדבר. וחיזקתי את לב פרעה, ורדף אחריהם, והיא כבדה בפרעה וכל חילו, וידעו מצרים כי אני אדוני, ויעשו כן. ויוגד למלך מצרים כי יברך העם, ויהפך לבב פרעה ועבדיו אל העם, ויאמרו מה זאת עשינו כי שילחנו את ישראל מעבדנו. ויסור את רכבו ואת עמו לקח עמו, ויקח 600 רכב בחור וכל רכב מצרים ושלישים על כולו. ויחזק אדוני את לב פרעה מלך מצרים, וירדוף אחרי בני ישראל, ובני ישראל יוצאים ביד רמה. וירדפו מצרים אחריהם, וישיגו אותם חונים על הים, כל סוס רכב פרעה ופרשיו בחילו, על פי החירות לפני בעל צפון, ופרעה הקריב. ויישאו בני ישראל את עיניהם, והנה מצרים נוסע אחריהם, ויראו מאוב, ויצעקו בני ישראל אל אדוני, ויאמרו אל משה, המבלי אין קברים במצרים, לקחתנו למות במדבר, מה זאת עשית לנו להוציאנו ממצרים? הלא זה הדבר אשר דיברנו אליך במצרים לאמור, חדל ממנו ונאבדה מצרים, כי טוב לנו עבוד מצרים ממותנו במדבר. ויאמר משה לעם, אל תיראו, התייצבו, וראו את ישועת אדוני אשר יעשה לכם היום, כי אשר ראיתם ממצרים היום לא תוסיפו לראותם עוד עד עולם. אדוני יילחם לכם, ואתם תחרישון. ויאמר אדוני משה, מה תצעק אלי, דבר אל בני ישראל וייסעו, ואתה הרם את מטך, ונטה את ידך על הים ובקעהו, ויבואו בני ישראל בתוך הים ביבשה. ואני, הנני מחזק את לב מצרים, ויבואו אחריהם, וכבדה בפרעה וכל חילו, ברכבו ופרשיו. וידעו מצרים כי אני אדוני, והכבדי בפרעה ברכבו ופרשיו. ויישא מלאך האלוהים ההולך לפני מחנה ישראל, וילך מאחריהם, ויישא עמוד הענן מפניהם, ויעמוד מאחריהם. ויבוא בין מחנה מצרים ובין מחנה ישראל, ויהי הענן והחושך, ויאר את הלילה, ולא קרב זה אל זה כל הלילה. ויעד משה את ידו על הים, ויולך אדוני את הים ברוח קדים, עזה כל הלילה, וישם את הים לחרבה, ויבקעו המים. ויבואו בני ישראל בתוך הים ביבשה, וימים להם חומה מימינם ומשמאלם. וירדפו מצרים ויבואו אחריהם כל סוס פרעה רכבו פרשיו אל תוך הים. ויהי באשמורת הבוקר וישקף אדוני על מחנה מצרים בעמוד אש וענן, ויעם את מחנה מצרים, ויסר את אופן מרכבותיו, וינהגהו בכבדות. ויאמר מצרים אנוסה מפני ישראל, כי אדוני נלחם להם במצרים. ויאמר אדוני משה, נטה את ידך על הים, וישובו המים המצרים על רכבו ועל פרשיו. ויעד משה את ידו על הים, וישב הים לפנות בוקר לאיתנו, מצרים נסים לקראתו. וינער אדוני מצרים בתוך הים, וישובו המים, ויכסו את הרכב ואת הפרשים לכל חיל פרעה הבאים אחריהם בים, לא נשאר בהם עד אחד. ובני ישראל הלכו ביבשה בתוך הים, והמים להם חומה מימינם ומשמאלם. ויושע אדוני ביום ההוא את ישראל מיד מצרים, וירא ישראל את מצרים מת על שפת הים. וירא ישראל את היד הגדולה אשר עשה אדוני במצרים, ויראו העם את אדוני, ויאמינו באדוני ובמשה עבדו. אז ישיר משה ובני ישראל את השירה הזאת לאדוני, ויאמרו לאמור, השירה לאדוני כי גאוגה, סוס ורחבו רמה בים. הזיו וזמרת יהבה היא לי לישוע, זה אלי וענווהו, אלוהי אביו ארוממנו. אדוני איש מלחמה, אדוני שמו. מרכבו פרעה וכלו ירא בים, ומבחר של ישבתו בו בים סוף. תהלמות יחסיומו ירדו צלו כמו אבן, ימינך אדוני נדרי בכוח, ימינך אדוני תרץ אויב. וברוב גאונך תהרוס קמך, תשלח ארונך יחלמו כקש. וברוח אפיך נערמו מים, ניצבו כמו נד נוזלים, כפו תמות בלב ים. אמר האויב, ארדוף אשיג אחלק שלל, תמלאים עונשי, אריק חרבי, תרישמו ידי. נשבת ברוחך כי שמו ים, צללו כעופרת במים אדירים. מי כמוך באלם אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נוראתי לא תוסף אלה. נתית ימינך תבלעמו הארץ. נחית וחסדך מזוגלת, נהלת ויעשך נווה קדשך, שמעו עמים ירגזון חילך, אז יושבי פלשת. אז נבהלו אלופי אדום, אלי מואב, יוחזי מורד, נמוגו כל יושבי חנן. תיפול עליהם אימתה ופחד, בגדול זרועך ידמו כאבן, עד יעבור עמך אדוני, עד יעבור עמזו קנית. תביאמו ותתאמו בהר נחלתך, מחול לשבתך פעלת אדוני, מקדש אדוני כוננו ידיך. אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. כבסוס פרעה ברכבו בפרשיו בים, וישב אדוני עליהם את מי הים, ובני ישראל הלכו ביבשה בתוך הים. ותיקח מרים הנביאה אחות אהרון את התוף בידה, ותצאנה כל הנשים אחריה בתופים ובמחולות, ותען להם מרים, שירו לאדוני כי גאוגה, סוס ורחבו רמה בים. ויצא משה את ישראל מים סוף, ויצאו מדבר שור, וילכו 3 ימים במדבר ולא מצאו מים, ויבואו מרתה ולא יכלו לשתות מים ממרה, כי מרים הם, על כן קרא שמה מרה. וילונו העם על משה לאמור מה נשתה, ויצעק אל אדוני, ויראו אדוני עץ, וישלך אל המים, וימתקו המים, שם שם לו חוק ומשפט ושם נישאו. היה אומר, אם שמוע תשמע לקול אדוני אלוהיך, וישר בעיניו תעשה, והאזנת למצוותיו, ושמרת כל חוקיו, כל המחלה אשר שמתי במצרים, לא אשים עליך, כי אני אדוני רופאך. Kaddish?
No, we don't do a Kaddish, but we're going to go on with the first day, Misha Berach for Cholim, a prayer for those in need of healing. If you have any names that you want to have included this Shabbat and Yom Tov, you can place them in the chat. Misha Berach Avatinu Avram Tzef Yaakov V'imotenu Sarich Rachav Leah Uyevarech v'irapeh et hacholim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachamim Aleihem Lazikam Rabotam Vayishlach Lehem Mirafuah Shleim Lam Yishamayim Fut Nefesh V'Taguf B'toch Shar Chol Yisrael Shabbat hi, v'yom tovu lemizok l'krova levo, hashta ba'agalav zman kariv and omar, amen. May God who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Becca, Rachel, and Leah, bring blessing and healing to all those in need. May the Holy One mercifully restore them to health and vigor, granting them physical and spiritual well-being, together with all others who are ill. Although Shabbat and Yom Tov are time to refrain from petitions, we have hope and pray that healing is at hand, and we say Amen.
Amen.
We'll now continue with the Maftir Aliyah, which you can find in the Eitz Chaim Chumash on page 932. It's chapter 28, verse 19 in the book of Numbers.
Ready?
Yes.
V'kraftem Misha olal Adonai parim b'nei vakash shanayim v'ayalechad v'shivach v'asim b'nei shana timimim yiyu lachem u'minchatam soleh pelulav hashamen shelosha eser nehem lapar u'shenei eser nehem la'el tasu nisaron taseh la'keves ha'echad l'shivat ha'kvasim u'seir chatat echad l'chaper Aleichem, Nilvad olat aboker asher leolat tamid tasu et ele ka'ele tasu layom shivat yamim lechem yisherech nichoach l'Adonai alolat tamid yaseh v'nisko uvayom hashvi'i mikra kodesh yeh lachem kol melechet avodah lo tasu.
Yishar kochech, toda rabah. Thank you very much, Dana, for chanting the Torah reading for us this morning. I'll echo Rachel Mayton's comment in the chat. Dana, that was amazing. Thank you very much. We move along now to the Haftarah for this 7th day of Pesach, which you see on the screen. It's from the second book of Samuel, chapter 22, verse 1. and you can find it in the Eitz Chaim Chumash on page 1311.
Vaydaber David l'Adonai et divrei Hashir Hasod b'yom. Hitzil Adonai oto mikaf kol oivav umikaf Shaul. Vayomar Adonai sali tzadati faltili. Elohei tzuri echezebo magini v'keren yishi miskabi nusi moshi mechamas toshieni mehulal ekra Adonai umeoivai ivasheam ki afafuni mishperei mavet nachale v'lial Yeva'atuni, Chevle Sheol Sabuni, Kidmuni Mokshe Mavet, Batzarli Ekra Adonai, Ve'el Elohai Ekra, Vayishma Mehechalo Koli, Veshavati Ba'osnav, Vayika'ash, Vatirash Haaretz, Mosdot Hashamayim Yirgazu, Vayiga'ashu ki haralom. Allah Ashan be'apo ve'esh mipiv tochel. Gechalim ba'aru mimenu. Vayet shamayim vayerad va'arafel tachat raglav. Vayirkav al keruv vaya'ov vayera al kanfei ruach. Vayasher choshech sevivotav sukkot chashrat mayim ave shechakim minoga negdo ba'aru gachale eish yarem min shamayim Adonai ve'elyon yitin kolo vayishlach hitzim vayfitzim barak vayahom Vayera'u afikeyam yigalu mosdot tevel v'ga'arat Adonai minishmat ruach hapo yishlach mimaron yikacheni yamsheni mimayim rabim yatzileni me'oivi az mesonai ki amtzu mimeni Yikadmuni beyom edi, vayhi Adonai mishan li, vayotze lamerchav oti, yechaltzeni ki chafetz bi, yigmaleni Adonai katzid kati, kavor yadai yashiv li, ki shamarti darche Adonai velo rashati, Me Elohai, ki kol mishpatav lenegdi, v'chukotav lo asor mimena, va'eyet tamim lo, v'eshtam ra me or avoni, v'yashev Adonai li katzid kati, kivori leneged einav, im chasid titchad Chasad, im gibor tamim titamam, im navar titavar, ve'im ikesh titapam, ve'tam ani toshia, ve'inacha al ramim tashpil, ki ata neri Adonai, v'Adonai yagi hachoshki, ki v'cha arutz gedud, belohei Adaleg shor, ha'el tamim darko, imrat Adonai tzurufa magin hu, lechol hachosim bo, ki mi el mi balade Adonai, umi tzor mi balade Eloheinu, ha'el ma'uzi chayil, ve'yater tamim darkim. Mishaver raglai ka'ayalod va'al bamotai ya'amideni. Melamed yadai lemilchama v'nichat keshet nechusham zerotam. V'titen li magen yishacha va'anotcha tarbeni. Tarchiv tzadi tachteni velo ma'adu kar sulai. Erdafa oivai va'ashmideim velo ashuv ad kalatam. Va'achalem ve'em chatzem velo yikumun va'iplu tachat raglaim. V'tazrini chayil lamilchama tachria kamai tachteni. Va'oivai tatali oref misanai va'atzmitim. Yishu ve'in Moshia el Adonai v'lo anam. Ve'esh chakim ka'afar aretz kitit chotzit adikim erkaim. Vatfilateni meri ve'ami tishmareni lerosh goyim am lo yadati ya'avduni. B'nei nechar yikachashu li lishmoa ozen yishamu li. B'nei nechar yibolu v'yachgaru mimiskaratam. Chai Adonai uvaruch tzuri vayarum Elohei tzor yishi. Ha'el hanotein nekamot li v'morid amim tachteni. Umotzi me'oivai umikamai terom ameni. Me'ish chamasim tatzileni. Al kain odecha Adonai bagoyim ushimcha azamer migdol yishot malko ve'oseh chesed limshicho lidavid ulzaro adolam.
Yishar kochech, toda rabah. Thank you very much, Jevra, for chanting the Haftarah this morning for us. If you had done some Torah reading, you can on 3 different trope systems: Torah, Haftarah, and the Megillot. Couldn't get the word out. The Megillot. And Dana also the change in trope from the regular Torah reading to the special nusach for the Song of the Sea. It really makes us feel like something special was happening. Thank you very much. Hey, we now would like to welcome Carolivia for our Torah this morning. We're glad to have Carolivia sharing thoughts with us this morning in connection to Shir Hashirim and in a continuation from the Shalem that we had a couple months ago for us to try and better understand the experiences and the feelings of those in the African American community, of people of color, and within our congregation. So Carolivia, glad to have you sharing with us this morning.
Thank you. Oh, give me of the kisses of your mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine. Your ointments yield a sweet fragrance. Therefore do the maidens love you. Draw me after you. Let us run. The king has brought me to his chambers. Let us delight and rejoice in your love, savoring it more than wine. I am black and beautiful, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the pavilions of Solomon. Do not stare against me because I am dark, because the sun has gazed upon me. Today, rather than explain the importance of Shir Hashirim for African Americans and for me specifically. I'd like to show rather than explain. Part of my search for unity, for one in Judaism, and weaving parts of my life from the past and from the present, the pain and some of the pleasure and the victory that is this song. So go back with me almost 70 years, fourth grade. How do you embarrass your fourth grade teacher? You have to read the Bible every morning in those days. And one of the other kids told me, instead of reading the regular Bible verse, a psalm or something, read from the Song of Solomon, we called it then, and embarrass the teacher. So I did. I read some of what you just heard, give me of the kisses of your mouth and all this love stuff. And then I am black and beautiful. And something happened to me that it's like, I was no longer trying to pick on the teacher or what's one thing nice about it is that they couldn't tell you not to read it because it was the Bible, right? and then the black and beautiful part made me feel like, there's a world outside of this world, outside of fourth grade, outside of Neville Thomas, outside of the Mayfair Mansion's segregated neighborhood in Washington, D.C., where people think that someone can be both black and beautiful. A fleeting idea just went past and became a part more and more of my life, as the curtains of Solomon, as the tents of Kedar. When I thought about giving this drash as a part of our ongoing series, I actually wanted to dedicate the one today to Molly Birch. It's extended so much beyond what I originally thought of. I still think of her as a part of this, and I want to tell you why. I remember Molly Birch sitting in the library at the Fair of Israel and seeing the big poster of the Jewish Book Council behind her, and feeling like she and the Jewish Book Council and Jewish books were like the mainstream, the real thing, the real Jewish thing. And I'm wondering if I'd ever have any kind of a status like that, wondering if I would be ever a part of mainstream Judaism, and admiring it and wanting to be so much a part of it. Well, this year, I have had several honors from the extended mainline, if you will, Jewish community. I was one of the judges for the Jewish Book Council. I was one of the presenters for the Highlights Foundation for Jewish children's books and literature in the month of March. One of my songs, I don't write music, I write words, as you know. The musician is the composer Bruce Adolph. But I wrote the words to it. We Are Free. It's being discussed and it's being archived in the archives of Jewish music. And I think it's all these honors, all these wonderful things are happening to me. And that my dedication to Molly Birch is a way of saying, gee, I admired this. I wanted to be a part of this when I saw you teaching in the Fair of Israel. And now one of the goals that I had in my life has come true. And I thought about the long walks by the Atlantic Ocean when I was writing my first novel, wondering if I'd ever be a part of this world that I'm now so much a part of. And it gives me joy to share more of this with you. Arise, my darling, my beautiful one, come away, for now the winter is past. The rains are over and gone, the blossoms have appeared in the land. The time of pruning has come. The song of the turtle dove is heard in the land. The green figs form on the fig tree. The vines in blossom give off fragrance. Arise, my darling, my beautiful one, come away. Solomon and Sheba, a story so important to Ethiopian Jews and so much a part of the myth and the underground thoughts in the world where I grew up, when it was still mostly Baptist. I was like the only Jewish person in it. I thought. It turns out that wasn't true, as many of you know. I felt like I was the Jewish person there. But it's oral tradition, it's written tradition, it's apocryphal tradition. And if you get into scholarship, people say, well, of course, Solomon never met Sheba. There was no such thing. The story's not true. Where did it come from? And it's completely taken away from of being considered as a serious event in our history. And I asked myself, maybe that's true. Maybe there was no connection or anything. But if it had been somebody from Norway, or if it had been somebody even from Spain, who said, our queen of Spain, our queen of England or whoever went to this land and became a partner with a great king, Jewish king, Hebraic king in Israel. And this is our story, and this is our myth. I wonder if it would be ignored and dismissed as it is when the queen is Ethiopian and when it means so much to Jews of color. Would it have been researched a little bit more? Would there be better footnotes and so forth like that? That's at odds with all the scholarship. Thinking about the Song of Songs and sitting in a basement in Cambridge, Massachusetts with Toni Morrison and asking you, why did you pick that title, Song of Solomon, for your book? So, well, because it's the first time I ever heard Black and beautiful and female put together. And I had to. How could I write Black fiction and not put these together? And bringing and the sense of the hope that when I first read Song of Solomon, Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon, it was many years before I actually met her. And I remember even when I heard the title, I said, oh, now is the rise of literature of Black women. This is the moment. Just by seeing that name there, I knew that. And later on, many years later, when I became a part of Tifereth Israel, I had Rabbi Seidel tape the whole song of Shir Hashirim for me, and I began to learn it and study it with him and with others. With Stephanie Rubin and others as well, being so much a part of my lives. And what I'm asking and wondering about is not to change history and not to make things fit what it is I want or what Toni Morrison wanted or what Black people want for this Shir Hashirim, but an acknowledgement and a respect for the ways in which fiction you can force fiction over the history, over the gap, to make these links so that you can have a spiritual and hope and personal connection, even if the history won't bear it out. And isn't that what not Drash? What's the word we use? I'm sorry, when you make up stories based on the Torah, but it's not actually there, and my brain is fried. So
Midrash.
Midrash. Thank you. Isn't that what Midrash is? And why can't we have these Midrash that are in the center and not on the periphery of our stories? If Song of Songs and the oral tradition of Solomon, an Ethiopian queen, were of a Spanish or Norwegian person, they would be more central than it is because it's associated with Ethiopia. And I wish I could record for you what happens when I teach a course, Blacks in Antiquity at Howard University. And I wish I could record for you the awe and the shock and the surprise of my students when I read that section. I can't get past that line. I am Black and beautiful. And this shock goes through the room. Oh, what? You mean thousands of years ago? You mean this existed before? And the only times I've been actually interrupted in the middle of a lecture, when I'm trying to give a lecture, and they can't keep still and they can't keep quiet, is that the first time? Is that the beginning? Is that when it started? It's like all this interest there. And then as important as it is in the Jewish tradition, it doesn't have the same kind of awestruck, profound influence moment. You mean we existed before 1619, that something happened before then. And then if you go to read the footnotes in the Jewish books, it's, oh, this is a farmer woman who had her suntan, that's all. I adjure you, O maidens of Jerusalem, by gazelles or by hinds of the field, do not wake or rouse love until it please. The love song. Julius Lester wrote the book Love Song about his path to Judaism. And he and I were friends, and I was teaching at Mount Holyoke, and he was at University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and we used to talk together. And I was in the process of formally converting to Judaism. It's when I hadn't actually brought the two parts of my story together. The fact that I was actually descended from, I am descended from Jews, kicked out of Spain during the Inquisition, and also had a desire for being Jewish that seemed to be unrelated to any biological impulse. And he wrote Love Song, and I said, well, one day we're going to have a series of books by Black people who are Jewish, and we're all going to put the word song at the end of it. So he wrote Love Song, and I wrote the book Peace Song. And it's basically to say there's a new genre of literature coming about. And the next one is going to be, I don't know, Joy Song or whatever. It's going to be some other kind of, and it's going to go through time. And one day people will have on their shelves a bunch of books where made up of a title that has two words stuck together, the second half the word song, and the first part, another good word, and it'll be African-American, a Jewish tradition, a tradition of love for Judaism and for Jerusalem. I remember traveling to Israel with the Tiferet Israel group and walking by the waters of En Gedi and thinking of Ein Sof, the original concept of a God that moves back so that people can do things and help complete the ways of the world. Butterflies, gazelles, waters in the desert, and so much love for it. My connection with the Beta Israel, Ethiopian Jews, Kana, Yerush, Yeshayahu, came close to an Ethiopian Jewish family there. And turns out that when I went to visit his house, many pictures on the wall, and there was one person that didn't look quite like all the rest. He told me that was his grandmother. And lo and behold, I look like her, or she looks like me or something. I don't know how it happened. And because of that, when he took me to meet his parents, where normally I think there would have been a little more removal or not so close so fast. It's like, you're our grandmother, come on in. And I became a part of this wonderful experience of being accepted without the usual barriers you have when you meet a new family, thinking about all the joy I have there. Martin Kessel and his daughter Dalit, a part of Tiferet Israel as well, helped that to happen, as well as actually the Social Action Committee at Tiferet Israel, who made it possible for me to make that visit. And I think about creating a special way to figure out when Jews are in the audience when I'm sharing my African-American books. And so I took my book Nappy Hair and I changed the title, changed the name of my character, which was Richard, Uncle Richard, and changed it to Mordecai. I said, because if I change it to Mordecai, what's going to happen is when I give my talks all over the country, when this book comes out, people are going to come up and say, why did you name him Mordecai? And invariably, that's going to be a Jewish person. And that way I can reveal myself to them and say, okay, hi. And that happened. And in doing that, I remember in St. Louis and California, all kinds of places, I essentially began to get a Jewish network all over the country just by giving these talks, usually in schools and educational centers. And I hadn't realized it because when the book came out, I had not yet come out of the closet as a Jewish person. And I decided to wait till after the book because I wanted to see, people kept saying that things would be different if they know you're Jewish, whoever they. So I wanted to see what would happen. And so I used the word Mordecai as a way of identifying myself in spite of not being known as Jewish at that time. And essentially created a whole network, a world of Jewish people that are still with me today. Who is this? Who is she that comes up from the desert like columns of smoke? no Black Jews. I want to talk about a very sad part, something that's happening right now. I have a colleague, retired Dr. Judith Peller Hallett from the University of Maryland. She's a classicist. Over the past 14 months, there have been postings on Twitter, Facebook, and other places like that by classicists, teachers, researchers on ancient Greek and Roman world experiences and reception. And many people, many of my classicist colleagues, and I'm hesitating because I don't even want to use the word colleagues sometimes about this, are saying we have to choose between being anti-Black and anti-Semitic, that somehow a Black person cannot be Jewish. And that sentence, I wrote that out. No Black Jews, there are no Black Jews in my world, was one of the statements made by the husband, a Jewish man who's a husband of a classicist who has much status and power in the classics world. We are very late. I want to read this to you though, if you will. The details. The current president of the Society for Classical Studies is a Black woman, and she gave a statement that other people, commented on, basically giving her own ideas about a particular topic, and my colleague Judith Hallett wanted it to be expanded through the ideas of a Jewish scholar. And by mentioning his name, she, meaning Judy, was classified as a Jew. I hate it when a Jewish white woman does that and messes up our conversation. Kind of thing that shouldn't be a part of a conversation at all. And what continued on and on. I if you don't mind, if it's approved by Rabbi and Jessica, no, I would like to actually write this in more detail because I don't want to do all of it here today. But I want you to know this is awful, awful, awful. And then Judith was treated as if she were it was just something bothered her that other people said to me, you don't have to be Jewish to be angry about things like that. And so I stepped up and I expressed my anger. And I made sure that when I had African-American classicists on my radio show, that it was clear that we did not support this idea that somehow white Jewish classicist women are always interrupting and always messing up. And I made sure that idea was not anything that we supported. And in response, I became attacked for the first time in my life for being Jewish. I had not had this experience before. I felt like I had been transported back to being 10 years old and finding out that I'm Black for the first time and that people hated me for being Black. And I feel like I have all these unfulfilled promises, many of them to people right here in our synagogue. And people, why can't you do this? Why aren't you doing that? Where's this? Where's that? And meanwhile, I feel like somebody's got a whip over my back, lashing me with it. And I have no way to turn to you and say, I'm suffering because we don't have any method. We don't have any system. If somebody dies, you can do a cottage. And if somebody is sick, you can do a mishabera. What do you do when somebody is suffering for the sake of your religion and being attacked? I'm being told, there are no Black Jews in my world, another quotation that was sent out. And this was read by all the superstar classicists in the world. I mean, hundreds of people. And a request from me and from Judy, please put a line about not supporting anti-Semitism in your papers and your discussions of yourself. And only the Classical Association of New England is the only one that did so. And I realize this is not a direct problem of the Fair of Israel, but it's a strange thing that we finally get a Black president in a classics organization, and she seems to be condoning anti-Semitic statements. And what am I supposed to do? I'm 100% both. I'm 100% everything. And it's a funny, I've shared this, it's not really funny, but it's kind of funny that most of the African-American Jews that I know, most of the Black Jews that I know are upset because their congregations don't accept them as being fully Jewish. And it's just my luck. I'm in a congregation like the Faith Israel, where I'm accepted as the mainstream, so that I get picked on. And it's to the honor of this community that I'm a part of a community that really does fully embrace me as Jewish and a part of you, and that it's not something that's temporary and can be taken away easily. And of course it isn't funny, even though it is. It is sometimes when I'm in conversation with fellow Jews of color, it's a strange kind of situation where I feel like I'm almost a representative of mainstream Judaism for Jews of color who don't have that wonderful experience. And sometimes if you wonder why we have in our social action committee, we sort of have two paths going on. One joining with all the synagogues in the community to do wonderful good things to help people who need help in our community, and another in which I'm sort of trying to share some things with you. And it's because I see a very vital difference between, if you will, the problems the Faith Israel has, because I don't see them as these terrible, painful, hurtful events that some of my friends are experiencing in other synagogues. So that's part of what I wanted to share. I'll read through the statements. I'm sorry, I have a list of things where I'm supposed to do it in order, but of course I jumped all out of the way and gone all kinds of ways. This moment with you, I went to Rabbi Werbo. Many of you already know about this because I've gone to you to tell you how much pain I was in. And I was in so much pain that I felt that I had to say something in Shabbat service that week, which was like 3 weeks ago. But I felt like I was in total free fall from this pain because I didn't know how to handle it. I kept trying to make excuses for people who had insulted me for being Jewish. And I didn't know how to deal with it. And I thought, what's wrong with me? I've been dealing with people who hate me for being Black for 70 years. Why can't I do it for being Jewish? But I couldn't. I didn't know how to do it. But I felt like I was in this free fall, and that all of you truly were right there and caught me before I hit the ground. And this, which was supposed to be a very academic kind of explanatory moment, is not that at all, but a personal thank you. And because of that, I got back in touch with Rabbi Werbo, and I said, I don't feel like I need to share it with you this Shabbat, because the kind of answers I've received from you have made me feel strong again, and I can stand up. Very different from Martin Luther King's death day, which of course the anniversary of is tomorrow, when I was a student at Eastern Baptist College. And we were talking in the hallways, a bunch of students, fellow students, all women. In those days, you didn't have men and women in the same dorms, that sort of thing. And I went into my room. Somebody said, listen to the radio. I ran in and listened to the radio. Martin Luther King has died. Oh, the horror. And then running into the hall, thinking that I would fall into the arms and the embraces of my fellow students. All of us grieving over the death of Martin Luther King. They had gone. Nobody was there. They ran away from me. I was the only Black person in the dorm. There were only 5 in the whole school. And it never occurred to me that I would blame them for Martin Luther King's death, but it's evidently some kind of whatever, guilt. One day maybe they'll explain to me, why did they run away? And I guess the contrast I'm making is the Faith Israel didn't run away from me in my pain. So I thank you. And the excuses that I was trying to make for my colleagues, my anti-Semitic colleagues, reminded me of some stories I've read of Jews in 1939 in Germany who kept saying to themselves, "Oh, our neighbors are not really going to throw us out. Oh, our neighbors are not really that bad. Our neighbors are going to be okay." And then, as the reader, because be much later, of course, we'll say to ourselves, I'm saying to myself, get out of there, please. They really are that bad. And don't let me say, I don't think I'm in that kind of physical danger for my colleagues. Please, that's not what I'm saying. But the excuses I was making reminded me of those kinds of stories where it's almost like you're incapable of imagining so much evil. There doesn't seem to be a ritual. This is one little comment. Let's make one. So when somebody's going through some kind of a hell like this outside, there needs to be something. Shouldn't be a whole Drash. You shouldn't have, just say, okay, we have something for illness. We have something for death. Let's have something when one has endured a particular kind of pain for race and cultural insults. I will conclude with a few thoughts. The biggest insult I felt from these comments was that it was assumed that I could not possibly have loved classics on my own. It was assumed, and that it had to be under the power of white people, and that I couldn't have read it on my own, thought on my own, used it on my own, and that is adding insult onto insult. That somehow Black people can't think when it comes to something that may have been brought from Europe in some way. And I felt that, as a classicist, as a person who loves John Milton's poetry, and for many of the kinds of books I like, those are the kinds of insults I've had to endure. Anyway, I am not going to. I do want to. I have much more. I'm not going to go into all the rest. Except two more things. I wanted to make a statement about Asian Jews because we have a new partnership. If you may not all be aware of, with Dee Sinai. She was with us in the winter and gave a brief talk. But I think a better way to address Asian Jews is to, I hope, Rabbi, this will be okay, to invite her to give a talk. To invite her perhaps would be a good way, rather than have me speak in her name or in the name of a whole group of people. And finally, many of you know that I've spent half of my life working on this book, my own Shir Hashirim, Asenath, and our Song of Songs. And although the words are finished, the reason why I haven't finished the last bit is because I have found that whereas when I was young, I wanted all my books to have my name on it and nobody else's, and it's mine, it's mine, it's mine. Now there's a great need for it to be a communal book. And I'm trying to get people to help me out to make almost a multimedia electronic version where other people's stories come in, and where it leads to everybody's story, not just my story. It's like Thomas Mann, in writing Joseph and His Brothers, had the same feeling. When he was young, he wanted all his books to be clearly his. But when he wrote Joseph and His Brothers, which by the way was the inspiration of my book, Asenath, in addition to the Torah itself. I have a cat who's crazy, and of course she's going to decide at this moment to go truly crazy. That the young artist wants to be all by himself alone, but as age comes by, the story has to open up to the whole community. And of course, he was kicked out of. He had to leave Hitler's Germany, and left his book behind in order to get, because he wrote the book about a Jewish character, Joseph and his brothers, and his daughter had to go sneak back into Germany to get it out. And he's one of my heroes in all of this. Let me be a seal upon your heart, like the seal upon your hand. For love is fierce as death. Passion is mighty as Sheol. Its darts are darts of fire, a blazing flame. Vast floods cannot quench love, nor rivers drown it. If a man offered all his wealth for love, he would be laughed to scorn. Oh, you who linger in the garden, a lover is listening. Let me hear your voice. Hurry, my beloved, swift as a gazelle or a young stag to the hill of spices. I am, oh freedom, oh freedom, oh freedom over me, my Lord. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be, oh freedom, oh freedom, oh freedom over me, oh yes. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave. I will die as myself and be free. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolivia. Thank you so much. You've given us all much to think about. We normally have an opportunity for people to share some thoughts and reflections, but I want to see if you are open to taking some comments or questions.
Absolutely. I didn't have I see there are comments coming in, but I haven't had a chance to read any of them. If there's anyone wants to ask, I know we're late, but I would love to have some kind of response. I would appreciate it indeed.
I think it's a good way. So if anybody has a comment, you want to raise your hand or just unmute.
Oh, I see Judith herself has made a comment. May I haven't.
Yep.
Thanks for sharing our experience with anti-Semitism in the classics community. It's the Classical Association of the Atlantic States, which has explicitly disavowed anti-Semitism. Thank you for clarifying that. I said the Classical Association of New England. Please contact me. Oh yeah, there's more there. You can see it. Anybody who wants to contact her. Anyone else have a comment or thought to share?
I wanted to talk to react to your comments about the Queen of Sheba and Solomon and how that story has been sort of marginalized because of historical criticism.
Mm-hmm.
We have sort of this very foundational set of stories: the liberation from Egypt, the conquering of the land, and historical scholars say that those things may not have happened, and if they did happen, they certainly were completely different than the way they're depicted in our books. And my response would, and I suspect it's a similar response to many people, is who cares?
Who cares?
It's like these are powerful foundational myths, literally, that shape who we are and how we think about ourselves and how we think of our story. And why can't we do that with the Queen of Sheba? I mean, Midrash, sure, but even more, the Torah, the historical events in the Torah, they're probably not historical. Who cares? And then the incredible images of the Queen of Sheba coming and the King of Israel coming in there. Let's make that a part of our story. And who cares about the historical facts?
Yeah, and you do feel we know nobody knows what would happen if something didn't happen. But if that if you had somebody from Ireland who had met Solomon, that it would be all over the place. But it's because it's Ethiopia, it's like, and it's like, come on, give me a break.
Well, actually, I put in a comment, I've seen a number of places where Brits have claimed that Jesus may have gone and visited Britain during the missing years. The Encyclopedia Judaica was very explicit. The one Roman province there's no record of Jews in is Britain. Not until after the Roman Empire fell for there, and so it's not unique. There is some chauvinism with people trying to connect, and others saying no, it's impossible. So that's although there's chauvinism is involved with the Queen of Sheba, but that it's not unique. There are other examples.
Yeah, and I try to share. I know of some of the other examples. Indeed, I think one of the reasons. Well, some of the things I skipped relate to that. But let me shut up. I'd rather hear from you. I won't elaborate. Judith, is that you? Can you speak? Yes, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Yes. when my husband Alan lived in France, in southeast France, an elder of the community gave a speech at a dinner where the chief rabbi of France was present. The story was that as a teenager, he had attended a bar mitzvah celebration at a non-kosher restaurant where they had been warned not to serve pork, and they brought out the green beans adorned with bacon because they had said no pork, not no bacon. And everyone became quiet and looked at the rabbi, who said, push them to the side. Now, the reason I relate this is that 50 or 60 years later, when he told this story, the chief rabbi of France stood up and said, that did not happen. No rabbi outdated in France would ever have done such a thing. What this is a story about is who owns the stories, who shuts down the stories, and who allows the stories to take off and give life to themselves, each other, and the people who may need them. So that was simply my association with this discussion of stories and whether they happened.
And when it's so important to a particular people, I think it's time to notice a little bit. Let's go. I think I see Franca next.
So, Carolivia, thank you very much. That was very moving and just a lot to think about. One of the things you mentioned was the idea of a blessing, and I really like that idea. And I was wondering if it couldn't be something a little bit like the Birkat HaGomel, which feels like it's for someone who has come through something, and maybe a way to do something like that. We don't have to discuss it now, but that was just a thought I wanted to put out there.
I actually thought of that one, but I hadn't got, I was in too much pain to go that far yet. But yes, we'll think about it. Mm-hmm. And I think there was Naomi. Was it a Naomi or?
Hi, Carolivia. Thank you for sharing your story. And just a couple quick thoughts. As a mother of an African-American Jewish girl, I really appreciate you being a strong role model, because I think a lot about what she may face in the future. So thank you for your leadership. And one thing I thought about was when I first read Alice Waters, is it? Walker, the color purple. And I remember she makes this kind of discovery of Jesus probably was a person of color. Jesus probably wasn't white. And I remember how profound that was to the character in the book, because of all the other stories that we are told and fed. And so I thought of that, but just thank you for sharing.
You. I'm glad to be connected. I'm so glad we're connected. Yes. And I know we're Rabbi, you're in charge.
Any other comments, questions?
I would like to read all of these comments. I'm sorry, I'm having eye trouble in particular this week. Too much screen time.
You can go back and scroll through them if you'd like. Also, the chat gets saved at the end of the service, so I can email it to you after Yom Tov.
Yeah, I actually just I saved it, so I'll have it. Thank you. I cannot say enough how much it meant to be falling like that. You've never been 10 years old, most of you, never been 10 years old, finding out that you're Black. And to be transported back essentially 63 years to that moment, and to be surrounded by a community of Jews and not being able to have a way of sharing that's established, or some kind of, it was really hard. And I'm so glad that I'm so glad we're together. What else can I say? This is not a scholarly presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Carolivia. In thinking about how we chanted Shir Hashirim, and it's a love song, and the way to establish a loving, caring relationship is to be there for the other person, to hear their stories, to experience through them their pains, and to be there for them. So I'm glad that we could be here for you and for others in the community when necessary, and that hopefully that will continue to build our loving relationship within our community. So thank you very much for sharing this morning. We are going to continue now with our Musaf service, and we're going to do things a little bit out of order. We're going to do the Amidah. I think that right now we need a little bit of private time. We need some time for us each to have our own private meditations. So we're going to do Musaf privately and then sum up with the prayers for our community, for our country, for Israel, and for peace before going on to Ein Keloheinu and the rest of the concluding prayers. So people can find the Musaf Amidah in their Siddur, page 166 in the Shabbat Sim Shalom. You see the chat, 456 in the full Sim Shalom and 343 in Lev Shalem. It's the festival Amidah with the inclusions for Shabbat. Everybody can have their own private times at this time. Leratzon imrefi vehegyon libi lefanecha. Leratzon imrefi vehegyon libi lefanecha. Adonai tzuri, Adonai tzuri. Adonai tzuri v'goali. Adonai tzuri, Adonai tzuri. Adonai tzuri v'goali. We turn back again to the prayers for our community, our country, page 148 in the Shabbat Sim Shalom. We're going to start with a prayer for our congregation. May the blessings of heaven, kindness and compassion, long life, ample sustenance, well-being, and healthy children devoted to Torah be granted to all members of this congregation. May the sovereign of the universe bless you, adding to your days and your years. May you be spared all distress and disease. May our protector in heaven be your help at all times. We say amen. For the community, may God, who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless this entire congregation together with all holy congregations, them, their sons and daughters, their families, and all that is theirs, along with those who unite to establish synagogues for prayer, and those who enter them to pray, and those who give funds for heat and light, and wine for Kiddush and Havdalah, bread to the wayfarer and charity to the poor, and all who devotedly involve themselves with the needs of this community in the land of Israel. May the Holy One reward them, remove sickness from them, heal them, and forgive their sins. May God bless them by making all their worthy endeavors prosper, as well as those of the entire people of Israel. And let us say amen. Our God and God of our ancestors, we ask your blessings for our country, for its government, for its leaders and advisors, and for all who exercise just and rightful authority. Teach them insights from your Torah, that they may administer all affairs of state fairly, that peace and security, happiness and prosperity, justice and freedom may forever abide in our midst. Creator of all flesh, bless all the inhabitants of our country with your spirit. May citizens of all races and creeds forge a common bond in true harmony to banish hatred and bigotry and to safeguard the ideals and free institutions that are the pride and glory of our country. May this land under your providence be an influence for good throughout the world, uniting all people in peace and freedom, helping them to fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore. And let us say amen. And for Israel, Avinu Shabashamayim, Sur Yisrael v'Goalo, Barechet Medinat Yisrael Reshit Tzmicha Gelatenu. Again, Aleha Bevrat Chastecha Ufros Alehu Sukat Shlomecha Ushlach Orcha V'Amitcha L'Rasheha Sareha V'Yotzeha V'Taknim B'Etzat Tova Milchanecha Chazek Et Yedei Meginei Eretz Kodsheni Banchilim Elohinu Yeshua V'Ateret Netzachon Tetrem V'Natata Shalom Ba'aretz V'Simchat Olam Liyoshveha V'Nomar Amen. And a prayer for peace. May we see the day when war and bloodshed cease, when a great peace will embrace the whole world. The nation will not threaten nation, and mankind will not again know war. For all who live on earth shall realize we have not come into being to hate or to destroy. We have come into being to praise, and to labor, and to love. Compassionate God, bless the leaders of all nations with the power of compassion. Fulfill the promise conveyed in Scripture. I will bring peace to the land, and you shall lie down, and no one shall terrify you. I will rid the land of vicious beasts, and it shall not be ravaged by war. Let love and justice flow like a mighty stream. Let peace fill the earth as the waters fill the sea. And let us say amen. Ashrei. Ashrei chevetecha rilucha sela. Shem shekachol shem shal shila v'vidim michal. Adar kvodadecha v'imotecha zecha. Zecher avtecha v'vitzim. Kevod malchut chayim. Malchut cham, malchut cham, Hashem. Tehillah tonight ever pivarach basar Hashem kodshol ilmed. Danach nerach yam etavilam. Hallelujah. Ein Keloheinu. Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, Micheloheinu, Michadonenu, Michemalkeinu, Michemoshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Malkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shiktiru Avotenu Vimotenu Lefanecha Et Ketoret Hasamim En Keloheinu En Kadonenu En Kemalkeinu En Kemoshienu Aleinu Leshabach Ladon HaKol Atekidu La'Yotzer Breshit Shelo Asanu Kiguyei Haratzad Velo Samanu Kamishpachot Adama Shelo Samchakenu Kahem Vigor Aleinu Kechol Hamonam V'anachnu Korim Umishtachavim Umodim Lifnei Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay. Kakatu b'toratecha Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed v'nemar v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz v'yomahu yeh Adonai echad u'shema Shema Echad. Come to Kadisha Tome, to the Mourner's Kaddish. I'll first share the names of Yortzites being observed this week in our congregation. The Yortzite of Daniel Anker, Dorothy Bessie Bernstein, Harry Miles Cohen, Sally Dugan, Abraham Flicker, father of Paula Flicker, Frank Frankel, Janet Jenny Kesson, Bert Stoller, Alice Wall, Ida Benson, Joy Greason, Joseph James Refrano, father of Joseph Refrano and father-in-law of Lynn Gala Refrano, Benjamin Roth, father of Nancy Roth, Hannah Abelman, Clara Garner, Lillian Goldman, Henry Keimwitz, Samuel Michelson, Morris Nevin, Lena Bullman, Samuel Zimmerman, Joseph Boyers, Sarah Brown, Abraham Lincoln Hess, Helene Laurie Buckman, Julia Drake, Cyrus Samuel Fisher, Morton Gold, Jacob Markle, Monice Mendelson, Florence Olschwang, Louis Widom, Isidore Izzy Birnbaum, father of Phyllis Peckham, Max Jeweler, May Klein, mother of Morris Klein, Lena Schiller, Richard Secular, father of Keith Secular, Hyman Schulman, Lena Tolchin, great aunt of Alan Tolchin, Dulcie Voisin, and Leo Sussman. In addition, we recognize the saying Kaddish for Richard Rombro, or Chuck Rombro. Any other Yortzites or people want to share the name of somebody they're saying Kaddish for? Those in mourning or observing a Yortzeit can unmute themselves to share the Kaddish together, and the rest of the congregation can unmute for the congregational responses. Yitgadal.
Yitgadash Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Amen. Say Amen.
Amen.
Yehei
Yehei
Shmei
Shmei
Rabba.
Rabba Barak Leolam Amei Amaya.
Barak. Yichu. Amen.
Yehei Shlama Rabba Mi Shemaya Chaim Aleinu Yehol Yisrael Yimru Amen.
Amen.
Say Shalom Bimruma Yuya Say Shalom Aleinu Yehol Yisrael Yimru Amen.
Amen. Amen.
I want to welcome everybody, wish you a Shabbat Shalom and a good Yom Tov, a Chag Sameach. Hope everyone's had a wonderful Passover. So one more day to go. If you're keeping track, today is the 6th day of the Omer. I want to thank those who helped me in leadership of the service this morning, to Stan Dorn for leading us in Hallel, to Dana Bayer for chanting Torah, Javra for chanting the Haftarah, to our Shir Hashirim readers, Myrna Goldman, Larry Paul, Gabriela Pereira Ferron, Franca Brilliant, and Javra Temsky. Again, a special Yishar Kochech and Toda Rabah to Carolivia Herron for sharing her thoughts and reflections with us this morning for our Devar Torah. Want to welcome Sylvia Horowitz, president of our congregation, for additional words of welcome and announcements.
Thank you, Rabbi, and Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach, everyone. And I also want to echo the thanks. We had such a rich service this morning, and it was really beautiful. And thanks to everyone for all of the wonderful contributions to our service. Very short announcements. We're quite late. Candle lighting tonight, 8:15 or thereafter. Services tomorrow morning. We'll be back here, same station, same Zoom at 9:30. And tomorrow morning service includes Yiskor, which will be at approximately 11 o'clock. And Chag ends tomorrow evening at 8:16. And next week, we'll be back to our regularly scheduled events, which I won't go through. Check the website, as I always say. Just a couple of special announcements that Monday evening at 8 o'clock is the Emunah class with Arena. And next Shabbat, we have a bat mitzvah, Bella Gotthealth. And that will be, of course, after Mishnah with Rabbi Warbo. So again, Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach.
Thank you, Sylvia. Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach. Yes, next week we will start up Mishnah again with a new section. So if you've been wanting to come and you thought, oh, I don't want to jump in the middle, here is your opportunity to start out fresh with a new Masachet. We'll conclude with Adon Olam, followed by breakout. Adon Olam, page 187. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yetzir Nivra Le'et Nasa B'chavtzakom Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Ve'acharei kichlat hakol levado Yimlach nara v'hu hayam v'hu over v'hu yiyeh b'tifara v'hu yiyeh b'tifara v'hu echad v'yein sheni laham shalom L'hachtira b'li reshit b'li tachlit ולא העוז והמצרם, ולא העוז והמצרם, והוא אלי וחי גואלי וצור חבלי בעת צרה, והוא ניסי ומנוסי מנת כוסי ביום אקרא, מנת כוסי ביום אקרא, בידו אבקיד רוחי אישן ואירם, ואם רוחי גביעתי, אדוני לי ולא אירם, אדוני לי ולא אירם. שבת שלום, חג שמח.
Shabbat shalom. Chag sameach.
Shalom.
Stay
Adilu
healthy.
simcha.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Chag sameach.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom, Chag Sameach.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat
Sameach.
Shalom.
Sure.
Shabbat shalom. Chag
Shabbat shalom.
Oh, Julie.